Hi, it's Chris West from House Calls Vermont, and this is the video introduction for episode 9, which is going to be airing on the 6th of July 2021, which is Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. I'm on vacation this week, so we're not going to be doing a live show, but we will be posting a update from 10 Old Stage Road, the deep energy retrofit that I'm doing on a farmhouse from the 1830s, as well as a repeat of an interview with Rob Conboy of Glavel, which is a vitrified glass insulation that can be used to replace below grade applications of foam. So something to really look at and think about, and try it for your project. It's cost effective, the same price if not less than foam for the same R value, and it replaces gravel as well. So take a look at that, and please come back next week on the 13th, Tuesday the 13th of July, from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. We'll be taking phone calls, and we'll be talking about interesting things as always. We'll have a subject then, and thank you guys very much for tuning in, and I hope you like this update and the interview with Rob Conboy. Hi, it's Chris West from House Calls Vermont and Echo Houses of Vermont. Echo Houses of Vermont is my personal company. House Calls Vermont is the YouTube channel, and we're here at 10 Old Stage. It's the 1st of July, and this week has been an amazing, seen an amazing change here at 10 Old Stage. I've explained in the past, and I'm going to do it again today, that the building is made of two different kinds of construction. This was a farmhouse built in the 1830s, late 1830s. I hired a local historian to take a look at that, and what he came up with was that this house has a mixture of rough sawn and hand hewn, and that the first water-powered sawmills were built down at the falls here in Essex Junction in the 1830s, late 1830s. So that gives us an approximate. It could be 1840s, it could be 1850s, but usually by the time you're getting that late, you're not seeing rough hewn stuff. So we're right now outside on the driveway. We've got two outbuildings. We've got this big beautiful barn, which I'll show you at a later point. They're just amazing in there. That top area looks like it starts with the wood does, but actually it starts about 4 feet lower, so it's kind of like a cathedral in there. And we have this barn. We have graffiti in both of these places dating back to the 1890s, so we know that those have been there for at least that long, if not longer. This barn was the carriage house. There are 4 stables in there. It was where the horses that were for the people who lived in the house, who were basically just their car, right? They'd go in, they'd saddle some horses. There's a carriage size barn door on the other side. There's carriage in there. There's even some old tack and barding in there. So here we go. This is the wood part of the house. And this had some kind of horrible, you can even see the remnants of it, this kind of fiberboard on the outside. Oh, here it is. Yes, this stuff. Just covering up the old clapboards, I imagine for ostensibly for some kind of air sealing, but it wasn't doing anything. But when I pulled it off, what I was able to see, pretty interestingly, is that here we have an original window, and there we have another original window, and that is all to be seen on the inside framing. So this is the original clapboards from the outside of the building. Of course, that's completely lead paint and everything. So I'd love to be able to keep this just because it looks so friggin' cool. But I'm actually going to be building out from the inside. There was a decision to be made. Should I insulate from the siding to the inside, which would cover up a lot of the beauty of the interior woodwork, or to the outside? And a bunch of friends of mine and my wife all decided in the end to vote for covering this up and keeping the inside, and I'll show you that in a bit too. So over here in the corner, I showed you last week, my son Sebastian was working on clearing this out, and the reason we need this is because here, and you can plainly see it, here we have where the brick building, which is the original house, turns into the wood building, and here is the beam. Now, not unusually, we got quite a lot of wood right on this beam, so I don't know how much this beam is carrying right now. And we do have about a 2 or 2.5 inch difference between the surface of the brick and the surface of the beam. I do have plenty of beams that I could use to replace this, and I may very well have to, because I don't like what's happening on the bottom of it. But the idea is that this will be one plane of insulation, right? We'll go from the insulation that's going to be on the outside of the building here, and that's shown here, right? This is the brick, that's the nailing base, those are the bucks showing how much insulation will be on the outside. Then we'll have double strapping, and then some shiplap, so just like on the barns. I don't know if I'm going to paint it yet, we'll talk about that later. Obviously we've got color indications from here. This is something that was covered up generations ago, and here's a good old-fashioned fix for a hole in the side of the wall to keep the rats out, or air sealing. There you go, air sealing from the 1920s or something, right? Because canned goods really became popular in the 1910, 1920s era. So this is the wood part of the house, and if you don't know the history of Vermont, I'm not sure what it is like in other regions, but there was something called a summer kitchen, right? So the brick part of the building, which I'll show you from the inside here, it's going to get a little dark for a second, and I apologize for that, but you can see here's the outside of the brick, and there's the entrance to the brick part of the house, and this is a timber frame, and you can see the timber frames quite clearly, right? It's a timber frame structure. Here's some now these are what we call matchsticks again. This is a kind of a 1x material used, although this is a bit thinner, usually rough sawn 1x that's used as the siding. This wall did have plaster lath, as you can see by the striations on there, and this beam had a plank wall along it. There was a door over there and a door behind me here, and this was a plank wall, so non-load bearing. It's a timber frame structure, and I have video also of when we took down the faux chimney. There was a fake chimney on the house. So this is the summer kitchen. And what is a summer kitchen? Well, here we are on the main part of the house. This is the brick part of the house, and right now this is what it looks like on the first floor. We went back down to brick on all of the surfaces except in the parlor, and you can also tell, although the trim is off because these windows have been removed, that this is the regal place. Here's where we have a fireplace with a nice surround. Here's where we have the 3 windows with this much more elaborate trim around it. All lead paint, of course, all that has to be stripped. That's still going to happen. And we got robin babies up there. I'm just going to show you real quickly. So here we are in this basically 1,800 square foot house. Upstairs it wasn't 1,800 because there were eaves, and the eaves went down to knee walls, and the knee walls were about 6 feet in from the outside wall. So this is 600 square feet. That was probably just another 350. So the whole thing was about 1,000 square feet. And imagine you're a Vermonter and it's the 1850s, and you're going through classic Vermont winters, which really start in the beginning of December and ended sometime the end of April. So we're talking 5 months of winter. Is a pretty standard Vermont winter at the time. It's getting warmer now. But you're in this house, going out and doing your chores, making sure the animals dealt with. This is a huge farm. This is the farmhouse from basically about 100 acres or 50 acres around this particular house. And you're stuck in here with your family for all that time, in these same 4 walls, with the same you know, look outside, the same, you know, here's the pad, that was the kitchen, there's the stove that was the chimney, and the fireplace that was the original, and then they went to a stove and they put a hole in it, and they're like, you know what, when we're done with this living in here for the winter, when it's warm enough not to be in here, let's build ourselves a 3-season building. And that's what the wooden structure is. That's just basically was for a long time a 3-season part of the house, built on a very shallow wall. That wall had you know, just a rubble wall, and then to be able to have a stove in their summer kitchen, they very intelligently just knocked more holes in the other side of the chimney that they would cover up when they weren't doing it. And when I first excavated, when I first pulled this part of the building apart and got under the rug that was here and the stairs that were here, originally the staircase upstairs was going up this wall, and then about a 4-foot tall hole in the brick gable end. Crazy, completely illegal and super dangerous in a fire situation. But anyway, when I got all that pulled off, I did find a brick pad here, and the floorboards leading up to the pad, which were, you know, this type of floorboard that you see over there, those had been worn so thin that they were really gone. They were like paper thin. So the board kind of had this like slant to it, and where there were knots in that wood, those knots were not as worn because knots are harder. It was a very, very pretty piece of wood. I thought I kept a piece of it. I'm not sure if that happened or not. So anyway, that's the classic Vermont thing. This room is about another 600 square feet. So they added another, you know, floor just like this floor onto the whole house, and they could all live over there and not be in this room for another year. They could spend their summers out there when it got hot. They could have a nice large, not very well appointed, not well finished necessarily. I've been in summer kitchens that look just like this does now, not like it did when I bought it, when it had been brought into the general thermal envelope, that it had heating, that it was a 4-season part of the building. But I've been in quite a few summer kitchens that were exactly like they were back in the 1800s, where they'd never been finished and they were really unusable during most of the year. But they, you know, sometimes people still use them as a summer kitchen. You know, you get 7 months not to live inside this part of the house because it's not so cold. And once again, a house like this brick house, originally has, you know, fireplace here and a fireplace here, and there was a wood stove upstairs. As a matter of fact, there's a hole here that was a hole for a wood stove, so there was at some point a wood stove right in the middle of this room, so you'd have a fire or a wood stove there and a wood stove here. I don't know. Anyway, that was the heat for the house. So people would come in here and they'd live in this house, and part of living in the house was keeping your outside clothes on, except maybe when you were in the kitchen. So when you went to bed, you had like super thick blankets, you had the bed warmers. It was not as cold as it was outside upstairs, but it was certainly, you know, 35, 40 degrees. So you really needed to keep yourself covered up. And hot air rises, as we know, and there was absolutely no air sealing upstairs, so whatever heat you might be able to capture was just not being captured, just because they didn't know any better and didn't have the thinking behind making an airtight house. It's not that they didn't have the materials. They could easily have found materials that would have allowed them to air seal this to the point that would have been better that way. But it is the 1830s. They weren't thinking about that. They were just, you know, throwing more BTUs at it, which was our way of thinking until basically the 1970s. So I just wanted to give you guys a really good background on the house, because I've been showing you. So when I come back next time and I start talking about a part of it, you'll know where I'm at. Right now I am once again in the old brick part, built in the 1830s. We've got a wooden part attached to it, probably built 10 or 15 years after that, but we're not sure. I know that it's at least from the 1870s because I found literally a dance card for a cotillion, and although it didn't have a date on it itself, had a lot of graffiti on it. And the dances that were on there matched exactly the dances that were on a similar dance card from the university, Dartmouth University, which is not so far from here, from 1878. It was the senior ball. So I've dated that to approximately 1878. It could be a little before then, a little after, but of course dances would go in and out of vogue, so it wouldn't be that much apart from that. So that building is at least from the 1870s, and I would imagine probably from the 1850s, once they realized they were stuck in this, what did I end up with, maybe 1,000 square feet for a whole year. Okay, until next time, Chris West from House Calls Vermont. Hi, this is Chris West from House Calls Vermont. Welcome to the House Calls Vermont live show on YouTube. As a part of our YouTube show, we're going to be doing interviews with people who are representatives of companies that are creating new products, interesting products that we're pushing or liking, and we'll tell you about what it is and why. And today we're speaking with Rob Conboy from Glavel. And so welcome, Rob, to House Calls Vermont.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for having me. Appreciate it.
Very happy to have you here. So Glavel is a product, a new product on the market. It is a below grade insulative material that we're looking at replacing plastic materials like EPS and XPS, and some people even putting rock wool below grade, which I think personally is about as nuts as something can get, because it doesn't absorb water. No, nothing like that does absorb water.
Or invite pests, but yeah.
Exactly. All the various things about why we wouldn't want to use a woven spun material below grade.
Exactly.
So introduce me to Glavel. I know quite a bit about it, but you and I have been talking for the past couple of years. So what is Glavel, and why should I care?
Yeah, so foam glass gravel is a product that's been on the market in Europe for over 20, 25 years. In my research of the product, I actually found an EPA report dated August 1977 that recommended that we convert our recycled glass, like Chittenden County solid waste glass, and turn it into the building material foam glass gravel, more than 40 years ago. So it's a product whose time has come. What's wonderful about bringing foam glass gravel to the U.S. and North America is that it's not a science experiment. We're standing on the shoulders of giants, European partners that have seen myriad of applications, including under footings and really leaning into the compressive strength properties of the product, issues like radon and how to put radon measures through the product. All of those things have been done over in Europe. So we're able to mitigate the adoption risk by working with our European partners on various use cases and how customers want to replace their nasty rigid foam board, as you mentioned, that comes with a ton of petroleum, ton of nasty chemicals that are pervasive in the environment, and we're burying this at an alarming rate underneath our buildings. And burying a product like foam glass gravel that doesn't have all those chemicals, it's naturally fire retardant, so you don't need to add those chemicals. It's obviously not petroleum based, so has an enormous amount of benefits, especially when we think about the broader sense of healthy homes, not just the environment within the home, but what the home is sitting on is critically important.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about exactly what foam glass is. I understand that it is a vitrified, and please, we can go into what that means. But you start off with used glass. How does something get from used glass over to...
It starts with, like you said, recycled glass. We're going to be working with glass that's been cleaned to less than 1% non-glass, so paper or the off chance that there's plastic in the glass, and that gets ground into a fine powder, and that's kind of what the powder looks like. And that fine glass powder, to it you add a foaming agent. In our case, we're going to be adding glycerin, which basically, as the product rolls through a 25-meter long kiln at 15.
Wait. We don't say meters and then expect
Oh,
people to
I'm
know
sorry.
what we're saying. So
75 foot, 80 foot.
25 yards.
Yes. We have to convert to imperial units.
Yeah, you're good. Go on.
And at that temperature, basically the chemical reaction creates the bubbles, if you will, and the product starts out of, I almost said 2 centimeters, but it starts out about an inch or a little bit less than an inch, and then foams up about 4x. And by design, as the product leaves the kiln, there's a cooling table that allows it to rapidly cool down and fracture, creating these, random shaped aggregate, for lack of a better term, that then gets bagged up or bulk shipped to site.
So that's great. First of all, I also want to point out that this, unlike most of the building materials that we use in Vermont, you're building a factory here in Essex, Vermont.
We are.
So so this is going to be a locally produced product that you're hoping is going to be shipping all over the country and
exactly. And in order to minimize some of the risk of standing up that plant in Vermont, we have been working with our European partner to import product to get some demonstration projects launched here in Vermont. We have a project in Richmond that's coming up soon, and we will be doing demo days out at our plant once we have that product available from our European partner. So we'll be inviting out designers, excavators, developers to come out and play with the product and see how it actually functions, because we are effectively removing the need for the gravel layer as drainage and the foam layer as the insulative layer, and replacing that with one product. And even before the current price increases of rigid foam board and the shock to the supply chain that occurred in February with the big freeze down in Texas, our product was at cost parity or a little bit cheaper depending on the size of the project, in terms of the installed cost of foam glass versus call it the traditional way of insulating below slab. So there's no green premium for what we're doing.
Right. What we're hoping with this product is that it's going to be a value added but not a cost added product, right?
Exactly.
And if it is truly a wash, then we're replacing stone, which is a quarried, a mined material, and we're taking the foam out of the entire waste stream. Never mind the fact that the most recent science is showing that microparticles of plastic are places where bacteria and other types of horrible things can grow in a way that we didn't know before. So when we're putting this plastic into the ground, what we're actually doing is loading our groundwater with microplastics for generations, right?
Exactly.
This is all just untested experiment we're doing on ourselves. So your product is something that takes a material, recycles a material, and produces what could be considered clean fill. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, we are definitely selling on the function of the product, not necessarily the form. But yeah, it's the value as an insulator. And in 2019, we committed to produce foam glass using renewable energy. So on top of the great story of taking glass that has little or no value and upcycling it into a valuable, useful building material, we're going to do it using renewable energy. So the result is an incredibly low embodied carbon building material as well.
So do me a favor, explain exactly how you're going to be doing with alternative energy, how you're going to be using renewable sources for that process. Because generally, just like with cement, if you have to raise something up to 1400 2000 degrees Celsius, you're using natural gas. So tell me a little about that.
Yeah, so we basically opted to spend a little bit more money on the kiln and electrify the process. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. Most kilns are gas-fired. Most foam glass gravel kilns are gas-fired. There are electric kilns in use right now in Finland and other northern countries where they have a lot of cheap energy. So we opted to switch to electric, and then make sure that we can keep a price point and a cost that makes sense. But we believe in the long run, that commitment to electrifying our production is going to be a huge benefit, not just to us and our operations, but also to our customers and the embodied carbon associated with their purchases.
This is exactly what we want concrete to be doing, right? We want to move away from you. I mean, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with concrete. The thing that's wrong with concrete is the amount of natural gas or other types of fossil fuels that are burned to keep that oven going for the, what is it, 3 to 5 days it takes to turn the base elements into Portland cement. So this is a great. I'm really glad that you went the extra yard here. Now, not extra meter,
No
but
pun
extra
intended,
yard,
yeah.
to make sure that you can look your customers in the face and with a straight face yourself say, we went the extra distance to make sure that this is a net zero plant on at least the making of the Glavel side. That's I didn't know that until just now, so I'm really excited about that part.
And I would say in a similar vein, our commitment around renewable energy, I think at the onset when we were researching the plants, we always sort of said, oh, we'll go electric later. Let's just get the gas-fired plant up and running. But it became imperative to not push off those decisions, and you can blame it on Greta or, just renewed awareness of we can't kick the can down the road any longer. And I think in a similar vein, our commitment around doing our part to integrate the messaging and commitment around helping issues of social justice is also part and parcel of who we are. So very early on, we committed to working with an organization called Working Fields here in Vermont that places formerly incarcerated addicted individuals into positions here at Glavel. And we're also going to work with Vermont Works for Women, that also helps women in transition in their careers and in their lives, as well as trying to place new Americans into positions in our organization. So a deep commitment to social justice on top of everything else. So we tick a lot of boxes.
And workforce training. I mean, right now I'm running the apprenticeship program subcommittee for the Vermont Home Builders and Remodelers Association, and we're looking at three things. We're looking at where do we get people. We're looking at what do they need to be trained on, and how do we get that training done. And we look at where do these people work once we have them trained. The kind of the three parts of that particular stream, and all of the Working Fields and Vermont Works for Women, and looking at the resettlement programs here in Vermont for making sure that these underrepresented populations are given an opportunity. How many people are you going to have working at the factory?
Yeah, the factory will be right around 13 to 15 employees. It's not particularly labor intensive, but it is a 24/7 operation. So
3 shifts at 8 hours and the whole thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I certainly would love to get a tour when you're ready for it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like I said, we hope to be announcing, we're calling kind of our demo days when we have a couple of extra bags of product available to invite folks out over 2-3 days to come out and really experience the product, see how it compacts, how it behaves. We have, with early adopters, we've gotten quite a bit of feedback in terms of what it's like to compact this glavel that arrives. Has to be compacted by about 1/3, and it's so lightweight, it doesn't really behave like 3/8 or any other stone.
Yeah, it's more like pumice when you're done.
It kind of, it floats, and it just does take a little bit of getting used to. So we want to make sure that we remove any acceptance barriers if we can by inviting folks out to try the product out, that sort of thing.
I'm super excited about exposing the members of the Home Builders Association to this product, and hopefully we also have early adopters within the association. There are people who are like, yes, Gutex, yes, Glavel, yes, all of these new products. And so we'll have to make sure we tick those people, and hopefully they'll be able to move away from using foam and using this. I did see you sent over some great documentation, which will be available on the links under this YouTube video when we finally get it up. But they include pamphlets, and one of your pamphlets shows where do I use Glavel and how do I use it. And one of them was straightforward, under a slab kind of situation, and the other one was as kind of a drainable fill to the outside of the wall above, outside of your wall above your drainage plane and your perimeter drain. So
exactly, and those are kind of the more straightforward applications. If anyone wants to put the foam glass underneath a footing, we do bring in engineers from Europe just to review what the expected compression strength is and what the load is going to be. Arthur at Duncan Wazinski was a very early adopter. I guess it was 2018.
Yeah, that was his house over on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So he used
Arthur
it
Chuckman. I just wanted to make sure we got the full name out there.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Under the footing at his amazing addition that he did here in Burlington. I should also mention, you touched on concrete. Myself and Russ from Engineering Ventures, we did a panel at Passive House, Maine, and Russ is very excited about the applications of foam glass gravel and the ability, because of its compressive strength, to minimize the use of concrete. So if design called for, say, 6 inches of concrete on foam board that has a compressive strength of 40 or 50, because foam glass gravel has a compressive strength of over 100 pounds per square inch, the ability to remove some of the concrete needed is an exciting proposition.
So you're saying a thinner slab would be needed under those conditions. Okay.
Yeah. And, new frameworks, we've even seen where, a typical 6-inch stem wall, they did a project recently that they had Glavel under the slab, but they were, doing a 4-inch stem wall. So again, just being, questioning kind of the rule of thumb. That's how you always do it. That's what the forms are. The forms are 6 inches, so we pour 6 inches of concrete. Everyone's really starting to question what's always just sort of been a rule of thumb, right, when you're looking at all of these designs and details through the lens of minimizing the embodied carbon.
I'd love to see, oftentimes, just like when we went to a 2x6 wall, there's no change in the structural ability of a 2x4 wall to hold up a 2 or 3 story house, 16 on center, 24 on center, advanced framing, all of these things that we're trying to do to get more out of our resources and have less embodied energy in the materials we're building with. Those are all goals that everyone would agree to, although everybody will have a different opinion about, the adoptability and when to adopt that. We're now in a place, oddly enough, with the new Arby's code, where it makes more sense to build with a 2x4 wall and
Mm.
do an amount of rigid insulation on the outside to get to that
Yeah.
R25 wall because of the building science of the first condensing layer. You have a 2x6
Yep.
wall, you need half of that to be rigid on the outside, so you have an R23. You have to do R23 outside to make sure
Exactly.
it's going to survive. Well, let's just build a 2x4 wall, so that's an R13. Double that R on the outside, and we're at an R26, which is above code by a little bit at this point. But yes, the same type of adaptation. Or adoption, not
Yeah.
adaptation. I'm making up words as we go.
Have you seen presentations by Chris Magwood and Ace McCardle on how well they articulate the embodied carbon question, and how with a little bit of homework, being able to make dramatic impacts on the embodied carbon. I highly recommend.
So, to be honest, both Ace and Jacob are on my list. I don't know which one of them I want to have on.
I would have
Both
them
of
both on
yeah,
at the same time.
They're
Yeah.
great. I've been a follower, a friend, and an advocate for new frameworks for a very long time. So I'm definitely going to be taking them to talk about a number of different things. Not just the embodied energy, because I think, and the CO2 sequestration that sequestration that they're talking about, I think is a very important point. Jacob is a part of the most recent advisory board on the newest code. We're having deep discussions, and he's trying to bring in embodied energy. This is the second round where he's bringing it up, and
That's great.
And there's traction now, not for making it required, but the new code has a point system. You have base, and then you have to add points. We're thinking about incorporating points to allow for that ability to take points or add points to your goal of hitting your minimum code by looking at embodied energy, which is brand new for us as a state, and probably brand new for the country in a lot of ways. And in that way, Vermont can be a leader again.
Yeah, I highly recommend folks playing around with the EC3 platform. So I guess it was fall of 2019. The partnership between Microsoft and Skanska, they put some money into creating a platform where the aggregation of all the EPD reports for materials that were fairly standard. They created this massive database where you can go in and play with, here's my detail, this is what it's calling for, and it spits out the embodied carbon of that detail, and then you can start tweaking it. What if I switch to rock wool, or make some changes? How does that impact the embodied carbon? It's an amazingly simple and powerful tool to use.
It's also a hard sell with a lot of builders, because builders are not there at counting embodied energy. This is really what we call bleeding edge stuff. But it's important to have the bleeding edge so that it becomes the leading edge, and then can become easily adoptable.
Yeah, and that's what's sort of fun about Glavel is, because it isn't a cost premium, because it's a easier product to install, they get the benefit of the embodied carbon story without even trying. They fall backwards into it. Instead of, it being the leading thing, they by default get all that benefit without even asking for it.
So let's just talk a little about the actual building science information about this. You already mentioned the compressive strength, which on your documentation is listed as like 118 pounds per square inch.
That's correct. Yeah.
If I remember correctly. What's the R value? Because a lot of people are going to say, look, I'm used to putting an R5 product on. That's 2 inches of R5 or 3 inches. That gets me there. What's the R value per inch of compacted Glavel?
Yeah, the installed R value is 1.7 per inch, and we plan on sticking with that R value until we have our domestic production up and running, and we hope to be inching that R value up, by say Earth Day of next year. But yes, it's about our 1.7 per inch installed. loose, if you were to just install the Glavel on the outside of the frost wall without compacting it, it's about 1.3 per inch.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
And as with any insulation, you're actually insulating with trapped air, right? That's
Yep.
in the end what we're doing.
Yeah, both trapped air inside of
And between,
each
I
piece,
imagine,
and
yeah.
then in between,
Right,
exactly.
right.
So
Interstitial and internal backfills, right?
exactly,
Right.
yeah. So if you're doing very detailed energy modeling and you have very specific targets, being aware of water table. So is there going to be times of the year where that R value is going to be hindered because of the water table? Factoring that into the amount of insulation that you install is important. What I point to is a lot of anecdotal evidence about the diminishing returns of foam board over time.
You're reading my mind. I was about to say what happens
Yeah.
to XPS when it's submerged for 2 years.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
we have so many, pictures of ants living in XPS and EPS. We know it gets soggy. We know that we sort of bury it and forget it and say, oh, we built an energy model off of that, but how does it actually perform?
Yeah.
So yeah, I would love, this one of the studies I'd love to see is, looking at the performance of slab on grade foam board over time to see what kind of R value it's really achieving. But just again, anecdotally, we have to believe that it's going to degrade over time. Whereas insects, rodents aren't going to live in foam glass, and it's not going to break down over time.
Right, right. It is itself not a food stuff. It's not a right. I remember when I was first doing woofy analysis, and they're saying the absorption of fiberglass is 0 because glass has an absorption of 0, and I'm like, no, I'm sorry. I pull out sopping wet fiberglass from cavities all the time. It's not the glass that I'm worried about. It's the interstitial spaces that traps the gas that we're using to insulate. That's the problem. So I'm 100% with you. We're constantly looking for good information about the degradation of a rigid foam insulation that does not have good drainage or a dimple mat, and you can keep it dryish, right?
Yeah.
So you can do a lot of things to keep an XPS or an EPS in good shape. I don't see that in the field. When I'm doing audits, I do not see people installing dimple mats and drainage planes to make sure that
all that gets valued engineered out.
That's right. Well, or the people who did it didn't know it and they needed it to begin with, which is more often the case. Oh, the code says 3 inches of XPS. Let's get the blue board, put it on, backfill against it, and we're done, and we're good. That's another nice thing about Glavel is that we should not see a degradation due to off gassing, right?
No.
All of these EPS, XPS, and other foam board insulations off gas and lose their ability to do the work that they were designed to do over years, and that won't happen with this product as far as I can
exactly
tell.
Right. Yeah. And when we've got cases, things like radon, so foam glass gravel, you can actually run your radon piping through the foam glass, no problem. If you are doing a high performance building and you are really concerned about the true R value and the performance of the R value below the slab, we have had questions, and we worked with Andrew Webster very early on. We had a question about active radon measures. So if you're actively drawing air through a radon measure, that will diminish the R value for a certain square footage around the pipe. So again, if somebody is high performance building and they are putting an active radon measure in, the recommendation would be, let's just sort of calculate, how long is the radon pipe and how much R value do we have to make up? We again kind of use a rule of thumb that the equivalent would be if that Glavel was wet. So we bring it down to R1.3, which I think is really, really conservative. But again, these are, high performance builders who have done all the different modeling, and we want to make sure that they get the R value they're expecting over time. So,
which is not what I'm getting when I talk to, Owens Corning about their ping port. They're not worried about that at all. They're like, okay, the R value tested at 74 degrees Fahrenheit is this.
Fine.
We're good.
Exactly.
That's one of the things about the hegemony of an existing product, right? It is assumed to be already tested and up, down, and left and right. And when you bring in a new product, they'll be asking you questions that these other products were never asked to answer.
Right.
Like the uptake of moisture in a below grade EPS or XPS. The off-gassing question, the difference in temperature of R value depending on temperature, like we know with polyiso, how it goes down as the temperature goes down. So
yeah, and it is a funny thing too, because you are literally burying it and forgetting it, right? You just sort of bury it and assume it's going to do what it said it would do, and no one's ever complained about it before, so it must be doing
all the
something.
time. No one's ever complained. I'm like, have you gone back and looked? No. Well, a homeowner is not going to complain. A homeowner doesn't have that. As I've said before, the homeowner assumes that the builder is the adult in the room. This is the person who has the information.
Exactly.
And if I am questioning that, I need to have a basis of information, of knowledge, which is really what House Calls Vermont is all about. We're really about letting the consumer start to understand the building science so they can make intelligent questions and bring up concerns to a builder that a builder may not themselves know in a state like Vermont, where they're not required to know anything. Kind of. Well, Rob, that's kind of all the time we have for this. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. And if people have projects, our typical process for walking them through converting from foam board to foam glass gravel is starting with the details. What are they traditionally looking at doing, and then we can help navigate them towards foam glass gravel as a replacement.
Can you just give a shout out? I think it's glavel.com, but I don't want to.
Yeah, exactly. Just glavel.com. And there you can,
and that's Glavel behind you here, so you can just look at the name. Glavel. Rob Conboy from Glavel Incorporated here, being built and manufactured here in Essex, Vermont, a local product. I couldn't be happier that you're getting so close to actually having the factory up and running. It's taken, what are we talking now, 4 years that you've been working on getting this together?
I first was introduced to foam glass gravel in Darmstadt, Germany in 2016. So over 5 years from introduction to actually having a plant up and running. But who's counting?
Yeah, you have children, and if I remember correctly, small children still. I think your youngest child is 7 or so now.
Yeah, exactly. Owen turns 6 in December.
Oh, there you go.
Liam is now driving, so that's terrifying.
As are my kids, all of them scary. Well, Rob, thank you so much again for taking time out. And when the factory's up and running, I want a live tour of it that we'll broadcast over the airwaves here too.
That sounds great. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. You're very welcome. Have a great day. So this is Chris West from House Calls Vermont, and if you have questions about Glavel, questions about details, please feel free to shoot us an email at housecallsvt@gmail.com. And you remember, you can always call in during our show times. That's Tuesday evenings from 7 to 8:30 p.m. on our YouTube channel. Just type in on a Google search YouTube House Calls Vermont and you'll bring it up. And the number there is 802-200-2550. If you want to call in with your question, we'd be happy to answer it. Thank you very much. And until next time, this is Chris West.